The future of Arizona school vouchers will be a key issue for voters ahead of the November election.
Two pieces of legislation that would change the program were at the center of a hearing in Maricopa County Superior Court today. Karina Rubio is live tonight to explain how this could impact what you see on the ballot this fall.
The judge heard arguments for about 2 hours in court today. One piece of legislation is Prop 212, the Protect Education Act. The group behind that filed a lawsuit to stop the other piece of legislation, HCR 2048, which could nullify Prop 212. A citizen group recently got enough signatures to get the Protect Education Act on the ballot, backed by Save Our Schools Arizona. Families would have to make $150,000 or less to qualify for ESA vouchers, except for students with qualifying disabilities. And it would ban luxury purchases like dining out, out-of-state trips, or theme park tickets.
We have seen about 4 years of evidence that is mounted to show that the ESA voucher program is primarily going to wealthier families.
Just before Protect Education made it to the ballot, Republicans who control the legislature passed HCR 2048 for a vote, titled Military Families Scholarship Accounts. It would prevent ESA money confiscation for children of military families.
The state of Arizona is going to make good on the promises that we've already made to these families.
But there's another part of HCR 2048 that says if Arizonans approve it, it would void any other efforts to reform Arizona's universal school voucher program, including the Protect Education Act, even if voters pass it. A judge questioned that in court today.
In other words, it operates to invalidate laws that may have nothing to do with military family scholarship accounts, right?
The plaintiffs argue HCR 2048 violates the separate amendment rule.
Because this is so groundbreaking and far-reaching, we think there's a clear separation and a clear ulterior purpose.
The defense argues it's a necessary protection for military families.
Voters would have to both pass the Protect Education Act and the Military Families Protection Act, and we're not there yet.
Now, both sides will have to wait on the judge's decision. At the end of today's hearing, that judge said he expects to come to a decision by early next week. Now, there's also a challenge against those signatures that were collected for the Protect Education Act. All of this will have to be sorted out well before the November election so those ballots can be ready to go. Live in Phoenix tonight, Karina Rubio for Arizona's Family.